Warm greetings from the National E-Learning Center in Riyadh, capital of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and Ramadan Mubarak to all the Muslims around the world. Amzeh Darge. We are delighted to welcome each participant to today's webinar on open innovation, AI and its impact on open education, as part of the Open Education Week 2025. This webinar will examine the transformative impact of AI and open innovation on open education. We will discuss AI's role in resource development, analyze its effects on learning accessibility and personalization, explore collaborative strategies for sustainability, and address AI governance in responsible technology scaling. It is with great pleasure to have with us today the General Manager of the Public and Education Sector at the Saudi Authority for Data and Artificial Intelligence, SADAYA, Dr. Najla Tuwajri, who will be moderating this session. We are also delighted to welcome the distinguished panelists, Jared Lee, Chief Program Officer at AIforeducation.org, Dr. Al-Azza Muhammadu, Head of Center for Skills at OECD, Jaina Devani, Education Lead at Open AI EMEA. We thank these distinguished speakers for joining us today. So without further delay, we hand over the virtual floor to our moderator, Dr. Najla Tuwajri.
Thank you very much, Zaid. Good evening, everybody. والشهر عليكم مبارك جميعا. So as you all know, artificial intelligence plays an increasingly significant role in open education. It enhances access to educational resources. It provides personalized learning experience. It has a very important role, but when we analyze learning patterns and deliver tailored content, we notice that AI can actually improve the effectiveness of education. It can facilitate self-directed learning. But this technology also presents lots of challenges, such as algorithmic bias or over-reliance on automated content, which may impact the quality of education. So in order to maximize the benefits of AI in open educations, policies should focus on transparency, ensuring content quality, promoting equal learning opportunities for all students, and so on. In this discussion today, we will be touching on these subjects as well as many others. And I'll leave you now with our first panelist, Dr. Al-Azz, or is it Jared? No, it's Jared, sorry, Jared Lee. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and hello and Eid Mubarak, everybody. Just going to share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Well, hello and welcome, everybody. My name is Jared Lee. I am Chief Program Officer at AIforeducation.org. We are an initiative primarily supported by the Gates Foundation, looking at how AI can help tackle the global learning crisis in low and middle income countries. And you'll see throughout my presentation that focus on low and middle income countries. I wanted to take the next 15 minutes to talk through how we see the opportunity for AI to help do that, some specific products and use cases that we're excited about, and then touch briefly on quality assurance and how we can think about what works. And I just have to apologize. I've come down quite sick in the last few days, so apologies if I am coughing and spluttering a bit through the presentation. So to set the scene, probably not news to anyone on the call, but as a quick reminder, we face a global learning crisis. Despite enormous gains in access to education over the past decades, we still have 90% of the population of sub-Saharan Africa in what the World Bank defines as learning poverty, which means they're unable to read by age 10. You can see the sea of red across sub-Saharan Africa there, where this crisis was made significantly worse by COVID. It's been very persistent for a long time now, and it's going to significantly undermine our achievement of all of the other Sustainable Development Goals. EdTech has been around for a long time now as well, and sadly has a long history of failing to live up to the hype or the promises to transform education. You may know the story of the one laptop per child initiative, which is often taken as the poster child for this. They gave away something like 3 million laptops across 64 countries over many years, but many different impact evaluations found that while it increased children's use of technology, it had little to no impact on learning outcomes. And there are some common shortfalls that these products fall into that have meant that they've failed to have the impact we hope to. They're often led by the technology and are not connected and deeply thought through in terms of how children actually learn and the pedagogical integration. We often drop these products without sufficient attention to how they're going to be implemented and the right support at the point of use, especially when we're doing it at scale. And this can often lead to products being misused or low engagement by users. That means it's a non-starter to have the impact on learning we might see in the first place. The digital divide is very real. In sub-Saharan Africa especially, there's something like 3/4 of schools and 50% of households that don't even have access to electricity. And so there are some serious infrastructure gaps that are going to have to be addressed if we're going to have this improve learning for everyone as opposed to for the few. But there are some interesting ways that we can start to help address that. And then finally, there's been just insufficient use of evidence and kind of data-driven feedback loops to course correct based on what is and isn't working. And so the big question is, with the advent of generative AI and all the excitement around it, the question is, will it be different this time? And my answer to that is it absolutely could be. And there is some genuinely exciting potential. And although we haven't yet really seen the transformative applications of it, yes, we're kind of cautiously optimistic. But in order to realize them, we'll need to make sure that we don't repeat these mistakes of the past. To start to unpack a little bit further what the opportunity for AI is, wanted to look at the role that AI is being used in education today. It brings a whole range of new functionalities that you can see along the top. So we're most familiar with ChatGPT and that type of chatbot, but they can be used for all kinds of other content creation, things like textbooks, lesson plans, and so on, digitization and analytics. And we at AI for Education went through a whole exercise of collecting ideas from the community, as well as looking at how it was actually being used in practice around the world. We found 160 or so different use cases, so very pervasive through every part of an education system. It can potentially have an impact, and without going into the details, what we saw was that there were these sort of big themes in terms of how AI was potentially adding value to education. So for students through personalized adaptive learning, personalized both to their learning level, their pace, their style of learning with tailored content. For teachers, tools that can support them to be both more efficient and effective. So a lot of that are helping save teachers time, but also especially in low resource and low capacity environments, providing structured pedagogy to help them be more effective as well. And then a lot of exciting use cases around accessibility, which are actually very distinctive from those previous two. So a lot about converting content to audio and video, chatbots, digital marketing, and so on. And these different capabilities can also be combined and are being combined in interesting ways. So kind of voice personalized chatbots, for example. At AIforeducation.org, we're trying to help the community navigate through some of the rapidly evolving complexity of all of this by producing a number of our own public resources. So we have literacy training materials, a dashboard with an overview of all of the products being used in low and middle income countries, which I'll speak to in a second, and then a number of resources around quality assurance, including benchmarks, an evidence library with 380 different academic papers assessing AI edtech, which comes with a very handy AI chatbot to help explore that evidence body. And then we're also trying to curate high quality educational inputs for training and RAG system of large language models to help improve their performance for educational use cases. And you can see all of this on our website, and I'll touch on more of it shortly. In terms of what we've found of the products being used today, so we've found 171 different AI edtech products being used in sub-Saharan Africa, India, and Pakistan. You can see that by far the biggest concentration is in India, where edtech usage was already relatively high. There's 64 products there, and then Kenya, South Africa, Ghana, also relative hotspots. Kenya actually has the highest in per capita terms. And you can see on the bottom here, they are mostly student and teacher facing, but also some for school leaders and parents at all levels of education, but with the bulk of them targeting primary and secondary education. And interestingly, and I'll come back to this, we looked at what evidence was being published as to the effectiveness of these products, and it was very, very slim pickings. So the large majority of them published nothing, and that there was 8 RCTs and a few other tech evaluations, but not nearly enough given how quickly this space is evolving. I don't have time to go through many examples, but I wanted to just call out a couple from one particular use case that we think are quite exciting. So ever since Bloom's famous but slightly dubious 2 sigma study in the 1980s, there's been a lot of excitement about the potential for one-to-one tutoring and how impactful that can be if we could provide it to every child. And with the advent of generative AI, that possibility has suddenly become very real to do it in a sort of cost-effective and at-scale way. These are a few product examples that we think are quite interesting. So Rory is a chatbot being used by rising academies in schools in Ghana. They've done a really nice job of contextualizing it to the local culture, and also using regular feedback loops and impact evaluations to help improve its impact. IDO is another interesting one in Kenya. So they put a single device in a classroom in rural schools in Kenya, which is used both by the teacher to support the lesson implementation with structured pedagogy, and then the students also take turns rotating around over the course of the week to use it as a personalized tutor. And this one has had the strongest evidence of impact we've seen so far. They recently had a study that showed 0.53 standard deviations from a study over the course of a year, with the students using it for 40 minutes a day. And these guys have really been living and dying by the sort of build, test, learn cycle, where it's very central to what they do. Every 7th exercise that the child does is a little micro assessment, and then they can use that data for a whole range of different A/B testing in terms of what types of content is on the platform, what is the optimal dosage, and so on. So they're 2 sort of mainly student-facing examples. We've also built our own teacher-facing chatbot in Sierra Leone, which is delivered via WhatsApp for teachers in low-resource environments. There are many more examples of teacher-facing ones. And then in terms of foundational models, so they all make different choices in terms of which LLM they are built on. And apologies to Jana, my fellow speaker, for calling out the competitor, but Google's LearnLM was something we thought was quite interesting, just because they have really invested heavily into incorporating the science of learning principles into the sort of fundamental training of this. So things like how well the model manages cognitive load, inspires active learning, and so on. And we hope that type of investment will start to permeate through other products in the landscape as well. Just to quickly speak about quality assurance. Now, this issue is extremely important with such a rapid proliferation of products and so many unknowns about this new technology. It's more important than ever that we're being rigorous and evidence-driven in how we approach these products. So I just want to quickly talk about, what are we seeing in terms of what works and what types of information can we consider, given that there are so few impact evaluations out there. In terms of the current body of evidence, so what you're looking at here is on the y-axis, increasingly strong forms of evidence. So from none at the bottom to some sort of tech evaluation, such as Tulna, which is a popular one in India, in the middle, through to some sort of rigorous impact evaluation at the top. And then on the x-axis, the scale of these products, so the number of users that are being reached. And you can see there's only a small number that have rigorous evaluations. These have all been broadly positive in terms of impact, although not yet transformational. And then we thought it was interesting that there are some of these products in the bottom right as well, Afrilearn, Jungru, Nearpeer, that are reaching millions of users already, but that have no impact, no published efficacy studies or indications that they're doing more harm than good. And our view is that it's really important that the spread and proliferation of these products doesn't get ahead of itself, because there's a risk that we end up doing more harm than good. In terms of what information we ought to be considering when we think about which products work, the joke in US education is that standards are great because everyone has their own, and not being one to miss out, we made our own set of standards as well. So this is our quality assurance framework for AI edtech. We looked broadly at what's already being used in edtech, but it wanted to build on it in two ways. One, the Gates Foundation were pushing us to say there's so many products at such nascent stages, and not everyone can do an RCT. So how should we think about these products in the earliest stage of development? And so we've separated this out in terms of the types of information we think you can look at in the earlier stages. And then secondly, what's new about AI compared to AI edtech? And specifically, how can we think about assessing the quality of the input that goes into these models, and then the quality of the outputs? And these benchmarks are definitely something that we can look at ahead of having efficacy studies. So the idea of a benchmark is where you test, you essentially give a large language model a series of multiple choice questions to see how it performs. We wanted to look at benchmarking the sort of universe of large language models against educational use cases. And you can see on the left-hand side the ones that we thought were important. We noticed there is a big gap on pedagogy, which is obviously extremely important for education. So we developed what we believe is the world's first benchmark for pedagogical knowledge. And you can see the efficient frontier on the right-hand side of all the different models in terms of how they perform versus their cost. And this can help product developers make sure that they're using the most pedagogically sound inputs, as well as the model developers help compete and improve performance of their models in pedagogical terms. So just to wrap up a few takeaways. So our view is that AI does revitalize what has been a broken promise of edtech to transform education. And there is some real opportunity here, but we have to be really careful to make sure that we learn the lessons from the past. It's still a little bit the Wild West in terms of knowing what works. There's very little evidence. The emerging evidence is promising, but we need much more. We need to think about forms of evidence beyond just randomized control trials, as important as they are, such as the benchmarks that I just shared. And this space is so rapidly evolving that we can all we can all do is collectively look into our crystal balls and think where the model capabilities, where the product landscape will be in 5 years' time, and try and keep up with it. So with that, I will hand over to the next speaker.
I think that is me. I will just share my screen. Fantastic. Thanks so much, Jared, and really enjoyed that. Agreed with a lot of it, and I love Notebook LM, so don't worry at all about calling out another AI company. Really nice to meet you all. I'm Jaina. I lead our education efforts outside the US, so I cover really every other country, but focus specifically on Europe, Middle East, North Africa, and in Basin. I joined OpenAI about a year ago, and at the time we didn't have any kind of education team or any sort of education effort. But all we knew was that since we launched ChatGPT in 2022, the number one use case was learning, and the number one user group was students. So we had to build something thoughtful, knowing that ChatGPT was already an education product. And fully echo and agree with Jared's comments that this is very early, it's moving very fast. The only thing I think we can do as a research company here is partner with the innovative policymakers, educators, teachers, students who are excited about figuring this out with us. So today I wanted to talk to these two questions that were posed to us. What is open innovation and what does that mean in the context of education? And I think that really ChatGPT, it's not an ed tech, but it does share a lot of the same DNA because it's about making AI accessible, democratic for everyone without them needing to be a machine learning researcher. And every day I'm at schools and on campuses seeing teachers who have this agency to build their own tools and create their own thought partners, create their own learning assistants without needing any kind of machine learning expertise. And also had the real pleasure of visiting NELC in Riyadh a few weeks ago, where I really saw the kind of clear thinking that's being done at a kind of large scale. So just to start with a bit of context here and how OpenAI is thinking about the change in education, we really look at it in three clear buckets. One is obviously the teaching and learning side. So we hear feedback all the time. We were just talking to a minister of education in Southeast Asia who told us that their teachers were spending 3/4 of their time on admin and 1/4 with a student. So I think really the ability of technology of AI to help reduce their admin burden, get that out the way so they can spend more time with students is hugely impactful, as well as a tutor that can understand the language you speak and the kind of learning you like, and can further be kind of customized and integrated with your LMS or other course material is really transformative. I think the second is helping educational institutions run more efficiently and helping every member of staff become more creative and more productive. And lastly, we really see the ability of AI to transform research. And this one is particularly important to OpenAI. We are a research company, and the majority of the people who work here are machine learning researchers and are committed to creating artificial and general intelligence in a way that works for everyone. So some of the most impactful partnerships we've managed to have with Oxford, Harvard, Cambridge, and others have really also been focused on really providing proof that AI is actually going to help teaching and learning, measuring learning outcomes, and producing studies as quickly as possible while all this technology and the shifts happen around us. So similar to Jared, I also wanted to call out some really practical use cases. And I think that, there are millions and millions of use cases in AI, which is actually very off-putting to people. And when you go and sit down in front of teachers and they're really just looking for very concrete examples and they don't have time to sit and learn about every new model name, you really want to start getting very specific about what this actually means. And so if I even just flip briefly to ChatGPT, I think one of the first things we start doing when we talk about use cases is that journey between starting off with kind of your blank ChatGPT screen and all different capabilities underneath, connecting to the web for more real-time information, or ChatGPT being a research assistant, or creating images, or connecting to the web, more moving on to this sort of marketplace where any teacher can go in and with no code and no understanding or awareness of AI can sort of start building tools that range from connecting to the LMS to being a friendly helper that orients them around a campus. So I think we really always try and root things in. How is this going to help you practically in your day-to-day? And the feedback we've gotten from teachers all over the world have been as varied as, this helps with sharing courses with my students who don't speak a certain language as their first one, but they're learning in a different language, or they're a thought partner as I think about a really difficult cancer research issues. So it really varies. But I think that the idea would be getting started, testing these out, and part of what OpenAI does is kind of really build that AI literacy and do a lot of hands-on building so people can start understanding why this might be useful and test the capabilities and limitations, and then feel better informed as well if they're introduced into classrooms. The kind of last few things I wanted to share are this maturity curve that we're seeing schools go on across the world. I think at the very beginning of engaging with schools and universities and ministries, we started seeing this kind of garden of pilots and this individual usage. So there was a lot of inequity that existed where some students were paying or faculty were paying and getting a better experience than others. And then there was a sort of pilot, maybe a research group or a team that was sort of trying out AI. And what we're really trying to move toward is a world where everyone can benefit from this at once, and working more with both the grassroots movement of AI, but also the top-down approach where leadership are coming out in really clear and vocal support, but also just sanctioning the use of AI and bringing it somewhat out of the shadows. And what we're really excited about is seeing a few now kind of countries and schools who are starting to think about what it means to embed AI in a really thoughtful way into all areas of the campus, and not doing this just between OpenAI and the school, but doing this with a whole collective of partners so that everyone is brought along together and it becomes more about civil society and kind of bringing along that change as a whole. I won't go through all of these best practices because I know we don't have too long. I'll actually just skip to a few really concrete use cases and success stories that we've seen. I wanted to show KFUPM, King Fahd University, because they were the first one in Saudi to adopt ChatGPT and to work with us on a really clear and transformational AI plan. But that one happened just a few weeks ago, so I have no pretty slides on it yet. But the one I will share is Arizona State, who are known for being very innovative, the first university ever to work on a really ambitious AI transformation program, not just ChatGPT, but a whole bunch of other tools and providers, ed techs that are really just upskilling every single member of the whole population. So across students, staff, research. And something that I think they did really well was take into account what the people wanted. So they started by putting out an open call for proposals across all of the campus, 180,000 people, and they got back 400 good ideas, and then picked from those 200 ideas that they could actually resource and work with, and then kind of carefully iterated on that so that it was really clear how this could benefit a larger group at scale. The last example is an entire country who have chosen to provide access to OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google, and potentially in future many other AI tools as they kind of embark on completely transforming their education system. The way they did that was Estonia is really known for having a really outstanding startup tech ecosystem. And several months ago, their prime minister went to all of their unicorn tech founders and said, how do we change our entire country and prepare now that AI is here? And the answer was give every pupil access to best-in-class AI. So the ministry came to us and said, we want to do this. How do we do this? And we really recommended not doing it as a pilot, not doing it as a small initiative where we measure one thing and one use case in one corner of the school system, but instead we do this collectively. And this one, I think, is really going to have a pretty transformational effect and really hopefully build a good blueprint for what it looks like to adopt this kind of sweeping AI transformation. I'll leave you on quite a few questions that we kind of go and sit down with university leadership on when we're thinking about how to actually start coming to the table with clear ideas and goals and plans for delivering on this AI transformation, rather than leaning too much on an AI tech provider or looking elsewhere for solutions. I think that there are so many insights that teachers, learning innovators, students are bringing, and we would really like to lean in there and kind of get into the difficult, the controversial, the uncomfortable change that is driving AI, but also seeing it all the way through to the end where it can be pretty amazing, where every student has a teacher that really understands them and understands the tools and are kind of delivering incredible education. And with that, I will turn it over to the next presenter. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to NELC for organizing this, and Ramadan Mubarak to everyone who's doing. So let me just share quickly my screen. And Okay, so I'll take you through, of course, some of the same discussion points that we've heard from the two other speakers. I just wanted to go back to the question on why we're really discussing this, at least from the OECD side, is that there's really an opportunity for this drive from the demand side. So really, what we see is that increasingly workers are turning to alternative credentials as a way to enhance and demonstrate the skills and their work readiness. And so that involves micro-credentials, industry and professional certifications, acknowledgement of apprenticeship, and badging as well. And so of course, the workers like them because these type of alternative credentials are affordable, they're short in time, they may increase chances of being hired, and they may help as well in career progression. There's also recognition, however, barriers from employers. So a lot of the automated applicant tracking systems frequently don't really pick up on these alternative credentials. So and it's still something that we see that because most of the organization use these automated applicant screenings, very few of them, only 32% of those recognize alternative credentials. So there's a barrier there. There's also the barrier around quality. So quality among alternative credentials varies. The whole issue of quality assurance is something that is being picked up in quite a few countries. Which skills are learned is also quite different. And of course, how to evaluate these alternative credentials in equivalencies is still a bit of an issue. So there are some issues around that as well. And of course, what we see though as well, and this is just data from the European Association for Manufacturing Technology, is that this is really in in-house training, but also online modules. You see a lot of different ways of gathering that kind of knowledge. There's also, of course, from the other hand, a supply drive as well for this discussion, which is that a lot of the micro-credentials and short-term training courses have significantly changed the educational and training landscape. There quite a lot of the campus leaders, this is very recent data from Coursera, indicate they're integrating micro-credentials. Some of them are even offering micro-credentials that provide credit options. So really, again, going back into the value of those being seen from the student's perspective. And a lot of those most of those as well in the survey consider that they're going to grow the program, of course, of micro-credentials to more students and also more areas as well. And what we see as well is this is a global trend. So this is really something that we see worldwide, but we see it as well across gender. So you can see here that in terms of female, male, there's more males, but it's quite high as well in terms of women, and also across ages, even though there's a bulk of younger people going into this. But it's still something that is really a trend that we see across. What's important is really that university students seem to use Gen AI. So you can see here the percentage of students using AI in their studies. The question was, so 86%, the ones that the frequency of how often they use it. And even also here, I gave some data around the usage of in specific country, the country where the OECD is hosted in France, where 55% of higher education students report using AI and coding as well. So really something that we see is happening. Why is that important? It's also important because it's not only in higher education, it's also something that we see at the school level. So here's some data on the school level. And what you see as well as here is an increasing use. So that's quite important if we're going to look into the usage itself. It's very much chatbots mostly dominating the Gen AI landscape, mostly due to their versatility and wider applicability. It's really most of that, a little bit of image, and still a limited use of video. What we're seeing is that it has to be, if we want this really to pick up, it has to be much more student-facing in terms of personalizing learning with tailored feedback and progression. Developing transversal competencies will be important as well in terms of the use of AI, so that it's not only about acquiring subject knowledge, and really making learning more enjoyable. So the whole issue of engagement and motivation, which I'll come back to in a minute. Teacher phasing as well. So it's really very much about assisting teachers to develop lesson plans, assess, mark student work, orchestrate teaching as well. So enhancing tutoring as well in hybrid AI human models, and improving this whole personal and professional learning as well. In terms of institution, really the use of learning analytics, thanks to Gen AI, is something that has really a great potential. Developing also standardized tests and supporting career and study guidance, which is an area that is very much still far from being satisfactory in most areas, both for the learner and the institutions, and supporting mental health, enhancing research and innovation. Now, this is really still about looking into all of this while addressing new and old challenges. So the digital divide, something that Jared was talking about, of course, new and amplified biases. Just going to click through all of those at once. Also, the biases, of course, in ensuring that use does not systematically disadvantage some student groups. Performance of digital tools as well, the inefficiencies of a digital ecosystem. It's really about providing what's useful, the issues of privacy and data protection, ethics of AI, something that we have seen as well is also lacking in the skills themselves of a lot of the AI developers, where if we look at job vacancies calling for AI developers, we did some work on 14 OECD countries where we saw that the point of ethics and usage was hardly mentioned in the job vacancies, and of course safety. And social acceptance. What we did at the OECD were joint guidelines with Education International on opportunities, guidelines, and guardrails for effective and equitable use of AI in education. So I'll really just urge you to look into those. It goes into a lot of areas about access, about empowerment and incentivizing. So really some guidelines there that were discussed as well with ministers of more than OECD countries and beyond, actually. Now, a couple more points. One is that in terms of AI introduction in schools, what we see is that the teachers, when they skillfully harness tablets, assistive technologies, and so on, really is about overcoming learning challenges and expanding their creativity. So there's a lot of examples, but what we see really is that there are few models of quality personalized learning at scale. It's very much still a few experiments here and there. And that it should not be a substitution still. So this should be seen as a facilitator of student learning. So they really don't eliminate the need for teachers are still a necessity, even with personalized computer programs. I think that's really an important point. But their roles, we have to recognize, is changing. So in terms of personalized learning, what is important in the design itself is really to see that it aligns to the national curricula, that it uses high quality instructional materials in multiple representations. So really not, we saw very much chatbot, but really going to images and video and audio. The issue of this material being engaging and attractive, reflecting also current research in learning sciences and instruction, being available in the languages that students speak, and really using adaptation, prompts, feedback, and dynamic content generation as well. So this really very much trying to target as well to the young audience. But there's some stumbling blocks that we should probably highlight. These personalized learning programs may collide with some existing assessment systems. Ideally, for instance, as students progress along the pathway, this is where we should be assessing them. But at the same time, we are bound by fixed times in the academic calendar for assessments. So there's this sort of difference between we should be assessing the student as along their pathway, but at the same time we have this academic calendar. And so there are high stakes national assessments that may not actually align with the temporarily with the learning paths of the students and in this personalized system. So something to keep in mind as well. This whole issue of what some people call now the Netflixation of education, it's because a lot of it is powered by the predictive analytics of algorithm so we're pushing a lot of content to user based on the like ratings and selections and personalized programs. And so it's really serving the students with the content and topics they may enjoy. And so we still need to look into this within the impact of the educational ecosystem and not just sort of something we should probably be thinking about now and not when we have a crisis. And in education and training, we tend to react to crisis, just like what has happened with social media and phones in the classroom. It's only when we see after a long time the impact that there is some reaction and some adaptation. So it might be good for us to start thinking about this now before there's really widespread and scaling up of use of AI in the education and training ecosystem. The digital divide I mentioned does remain. So we see that half of the students from the most privileged backgrounds used Gen AI to summarize articles, and so compared with 44% from the least privileged backgrounds. Only a third of students have received training in AI skills from their university. There's some surveys that are happening. A lot of students tend to answer this way. So they don't really know where they stand in terms of the usage. So they say it's not banned, but it's not advised. It's considered a little bit academic misconduct if you use it, but at the same time, the lecturers tell us that they use it. So it's very mixed messages, and a lot of students don't really know where they fit into this, all of this. And then also something just to keep in mind, which is about AI for us is quite important when we're looking at where do we stand today and tomorrow in terms of school. So the teacher shortages, and just one number here from the UNESCO, they estimate that close to 70 million more teachers will be needed to be recruited by 2030. So we do have a teacher shortage, and so that's where we think that AI may help us as well in that sense. The usage and helping learners with disabilities is very much being proven, so that has a real value. And also in terms of providing authentication, we're seeing a lot of usage as well when it comes to facial recognition, biometrics, voice recognition. So increasingly being used by universities to verify candidates in examinations, but also potentially being used as well when it comes to counterfeit programs and when we're looking into blockchain technologies as well. What's important is really to involve teachers in this whole sort of new phase we're going into, and the past has not been very good in that. There's a survey that was done that teachers seldom take part in decisions on tech. So 45% of teachers from 94 countries participating in this study reported that their unions had not been consulted at all regarding the introduction of new digital tech, and only 30% had been consulted on some aspects. So it's really important that we focus on involving teachers and also that we focus on addressing the challenges that teachers experience. So really very much this purpose-driven AI rather than, well, this is what AI can do, and so we should be doing. It's really about where should we be implementing it in. And a lot of areas, for instance, where it's quite important is really about handling low-level details to ease teaching burdens. You see here the average hours of working time per week for teachers. So they spend less than half of the time in direct interactions with students. And so it's really important that we focus on having AI focusing on where teachers need the most help. And you can see here as well, I won't go too much into this. There's a lot of examples of applications providing, for instance, more extensive personal notes to families and caregivers. So AI assistants can provide drafts based on the students' recent classroom work. So really increasing this teacher connection with families and caregivers through AI. having voice assistants of other forms of AI make it easier to stay organized, to follow up after the classroom, or having the teacher sit with the student for only one example, one problem, and then delegating to an AI to help with 4, 5, 6 problems more. So, or helping the teacher record the classroom and then AI algorithm highlighting classroom areas where there could be really sort of improvement. So having that more of a professional development coach. So very much about making all of this more productive and fruitful for the teacher themselves. So a few questions here as well, so that I think we should be keeping in mind is it to what extent is AI enabling adaptation to student strength and not only their deficits? Does AI contribute to aspects of student collaboration that we value, like sort of mutual engagement, peer help? I think it's important that we make sure that those type of tasks is also included in the curricula that is then developed. Of course, the whole issue of privacy and data protection, and making sure as well that guardians are informed about what happens with the data and the students themselves as well. So the sort of issue around transparency, and of course the whole issue of impact of using AI, and do we know where or not? And so the last point I want to mention is one element that is being more and more in discussion is that perhaps this may help students to be more immersed in their learning. So there's this whole issue of the flow state, and sort of perhaps by reducing the cognitive load required to complete an assignment, we could increase the motivation and facilitate a sense of flow, really, where the student is very much going in the assignment with the help, and it makes it a much more positive and rewarding learning experience. So that's something that hopefully is also something that will be happening. Why is that important? Because what we're seeing is that our new societies and economies need lifelong learning. And so if we can develop this through the use of AI, that would really very much be a win. So I'll stop sharing and look forward to the next speaker. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Doctor. السلام عليكم مرة أخرى جميعا، والشهر عليكم مبارك. بس أحب أذكركم اللي عنده أي أسئلة عن الجلسة أو المحاضرات تضعونها في Q&A سواء باللغة العربية أو باللغة الإنجليزية، وبإذن الله بعد الانتهاء يعني نشارك بعض الأسئلة اللي مع الخبراء. So once again, I hope you can see my screen. Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for joining me today. Today, I will be speaking about a very important topic, which is AI governance in open education. As we have all heard today, artificial intelligence is transforming the way we learn, but are we ensuring that it remains ethical, fair, and accountable? As educators, as policymakers, we should guide AI's role in the education. So I'd like to explore in the next few minutes how we can do this. First, I'll start by what is open education. We've been hearing for the last hour about open education. Many of you have used online learning platforms such as Coursera or Khan Academy. These platforms are examples of open education, which is accessible, flexible learning that removes barriers such as cost and location. Now, AI plays a big role in expanding open education, but if we don't govern it properly, it could create new barriers instead of breaking them down. This is why it's really important for us to govern AI and govern open education. As I said, there are many benefits to it, such as flexibility, affordability, and global research. I'd like to speak a little about the role of AI in open education. So AI has a very important role in three key aspects. Adaptive learning, automated grading, and intelligent tutoring. Adaptive learning means that the system can personalize content based on students' strengths, their weaknesses, how they are doing during the time that they are taking the course online. Automated grading for teachers will obviously speed up assessments. It will allow more time for teachers to focus on teaching rather than paperwork. And AI tutors will provide personalized assistance to students 24/7. This should help students learn at their own pace. So no more one-size-fits-all sort of approach. But if we think critically, there are a number of risks in this approach because AI can introduce bias, it can lack transparency, it can create some privacy concerns. And so, although it is powerful, it really needs strong governance to ensure fairness and accountability. We heard a little about ethical AI. So ethics are at the heart of AI in education. So I will just, ask you a question. What happens if AI was designed without any ethics in mind? So we've seen some examples where AI-driven hiring systems have been biased against women. We've seen examples where facial recognition software has misidentified some people. Now, suppose that we have this in an AI grading system. It will unintentionally favor some students against others. It will disadvantage certain students. In order to prevent this, educational institutions must implement ethical AI frameworks that would ensure that these frameworks would protect the students, they would respect human rights, and they would not share the huge amount of data that these systems will probably be collecting from the students. Fairness in AI means that all students, regardless of race, gender, or their socioeconomic status, have equal learning opportunities. But again, AI can be biased if it's trained on incomplete or non-diverse data sets. For example, and I will give you an example of a system that we developed at Sadaya and where we piloted it only on a private school. So we developed a smart learning management system, and we piloted this management system on a private school. When we did that, the data that we collected was obviously biased because it did not mirror what would be relevant, let's say, in public schools, in other smaller towns throughout the country, because as you know, Saudi Arabia is a large country. Another example was of a system, but this is another example, so not the one by Sadaya, where an AI tutoring system was trained only on English-speaking students from a developed country. When they tried out the system on students in non-English speaking countries, it did not perform so well. So how can we fix these problems? First of all, we should try as much as possible to use diverse data sets. So AI should be trained on data that represents all students. And that's the reason, as I told you, why when we piloted on a private school, we went and did another pilot on a public school, and then we're moving on to different areas of Saudi. We're trying to diversify our data set as much as possible. We should also implement bias detection tools. So AI models should be tested on a regular basis for hidden biases. We should conduct fairness audits. So schools should, for example, check how AI is impacting students across different demographics. When we prioritize fairness, AI can truly change education rather than, if we reinforce the existing inequalities. So who should be responsible for these AI-driven decisions? Should it be the software developers? Should it be the schools? Should it be the government? Should it be the teachers, the parents? The reality is we all play a role. So schools should monitor AI systems, policymakers should set regulations, and AI developers should ensure ethical design. Without accountability, AI could make flawed decisions with no one to answer for them. Some of the solutions are regular evaluations of AI decisions to ensure fairness. So from time to time, we should have some AI audits, let's call them, where we would evaluate how our system is working. Human oversight is very important, where AI should assist but not replace educators, and that's a very crucial point. So AI can never replace teachers. That's a point that we should always think of. It can help. AI is a tool, but it's not a replacement. The third point is legal frameworks, where policies should define who is responsible when AI causes harm. And without accountability, AI risks will be like an invisible decision maker with no checks and no balances, and that is not something that we would like to see in the future. Another point that I would like to discuss is transparency in AI. So imagine if a student's exam results were determined by an AI system, but no one could explain how it arrived. That wouldn't be fair for the student. AI transparency means that the decision-making process is understandable. But at the moment, many AI models are what are called black boxes. Their logic is hidden within complex algorithms. They are not, people cannot access them. So how can we improve this transparency? There is something that is called explainable AI, XAI, where AI systems should provide clear justifications for their decisions. Open source AI models, which allow researchers and educators to inspect the code, and public AI policies. So governments should mandate transparency in AI-driven education. Transparency should build trust, and trust is essential for AI adoption in education. I'd like to speak about some challenges that we may find in AI governance, that despite the benefits of AI, implementing these governance is actually quite challenging. For one thing, privacy concerns, where AI systems collect vast amounts of student data. So how do we ensure that this data is not misused? Resistance to AI adoption. So many educators fear AI. They fear that it will replace teachers or that it will introduce ethical issues. Global regulation issues. So education systems worldwide will have different policies, making it hard to create a universal AI governance rule. So how do we move forward? Here are three best practices for AI governance in education. So we should promote fairness, accountability, and transparency. We should adopt AI ethics standards and governance policies. We should encourage stakeholder involvement. Educators, students, policymakers should all have a say in AI governance. Now, many institutions, as we have seen, have already applied AI in their systems, and many institutions have actually applied AI governance principles, AI-driven tutoring systems, where some platforms use bias detection tools to ensure fair learning experiences, transparent AI grading algorithms, where again, some universities are using explainable AI to make automated grading more transparent to their students, and institutional AI policies. So a number of leading universities are implementing guidelines to regulate AI use in their classrooms. What is the future of AI in open education? AI will, for sure, it will continue to evolve. But what does that mean for education? AI-powered virtual teachers may assist students in remote areas. As I said previously, personalized learning paths will emerge, and governance frameworks must be adopted to new AI developments. The key is collaboration. Again, policymakers, educators, AI developers, students, teachers must all work together to ensure AI remains a force for good in education. Finally, I just summarize what my talk was about. So AI governance is essential for ethical and responsible education. Without it, AI could introduce biases, it can violate privacy, and it can reduce accountability. So I encourage each and every one of you, including myself, whether you are an educator, a student, a policymaker, to advocate for fair and accountable and transparent AI in education. The future of learning is evolving day by day, and I think we should all work together to ensure that AI serves everyone fairly. Thank you very much. I think we will move now to our panel discussion with our experts. I have a question for all of our experts, so please feel free to answer. So as we said, open education promotes a learner-driven approach. How can we ensure that this flexibility does not lead to an oversaturation of low-quality content or credential inflation in the system? So our panelists, including myself.
Who would you like to go first?
It's up to you. You can go first, please.
Sure, I'll just chip in quickly because I'm interested to hear the others' thoughts as well. It's an important question, and I love this concept that Dr. Eliza mentioned about the Netflixization of education. It reminds me of when we looked at the product landscape of the 171 products being implemented in low and middle income countries. The large majority of them were relying on user reviews as their kind of main form of marketing and way to signify the quality of their product. And I guess this partly speaks to the commercial motive of these products, where they're fundamentally trying to sell something as opposed to improve learning necessarily, or at least the latter is a kind of is a secondary objective. I would worry about poor quality content in two ways. One is about the actual impact that these edtech products themselves are having, which I already spoke about in my presentation. But also for the foundational models themselves, as we've heard from some of these speeches, the data on which they're trained is often a slightly random corpus of stuff from the internet. And when we think about applying these, in a particular context to a particular curriculum, it's really important that we're able to train and tailor these models to be aligned to the local curriculum, to sort of local norms and values, and ensure really high quality content in the process. We've started on a project to try and curate high quality lesson plans as part of training data for LLMs for a number of countries, but it's a huge task, and I feel like we can only make a small dint in it. And we're not looking at Saudi Arabia at this point, but I think that would be a really fruitful endeavor. Dr. Eliza, what do you think?
I wanted to just add that I think you're touching a point that's really important, which is the issue of quality assurance, and that is something that we see. We did some work recently on quality assurance, and we saw that less than 10% of countries include the analysis of performance indicators in adult education and training. So there's really a lot of it's a big gap. You are right that unless there is a quality assurance framework and that there is monitoring, evaluation, validation of those credentials, we do run the risk of having this sort of commercialized type of micro-credentials and so on being made available. So I think that's really a big issue. And quite a lot of countries are looking into this very quickly, very clearly. And so I think there's some good examples there that can be looked into as well.
Yeah, I would really echo those points. I think in particular around sort of diverse data sources and diversity when sharing knowledge with these foundational models. I completely agree that is a risk that we should be looking out for, and the more steps we can make toward personalization, encouraging the critical engagement of these tools, so much the better. And maybe just to give you a specific example, speaking from the foundational model provider perspective on this call, I was really, one of the reasons I joined OpenAI was seeing some of the work we did with the government of Iceland, where we worked together to preserve Icelandic language, promote inclusion of kind of other low resource languages generally in AI technologies, and really trained the models on specific Icelandic grammar and cultural nuances, something I hope we can do for every country. But that seemed to me a really tangible, putting your money where your mouth is kind of work in action to support a slightly more content-rich output.
Okay, so I will just just add to that I think that if we want to maintain quality in open education while preserving its flexibility, we would need to establish some rigorous accreditation standards. I think that we should leverage AI and peer reviews for content quality, as my colleague said. I think we should also promote academic recognition and implement learner assessment and maybe some competency verification. I think that learners should be guided and supported If all of these are combined, I think that we will be able to overcome these problems. I have a question for you, Jared. So you've talked about how EdTech has failed to live up to its promise in the past. So what separates the AI products that could succeed in boosting learning at scale from those that won't?
Thank you for the $1 million question. I think if we knew the answer to that for sure, it would definitely help policymakers and teachers and everyone know where to focus their energies. I mean, my sense is that there's a couple things that are really important. The first thing is that it's really important that we're not doing tech in a vacuum, but that it's being really thoughtfully integrated into what's already happening in the classroom, as well as what's already happening at a sort of system level. So really strong kind of pedagogical integration, and where we can align it with existing evidence-based interventions, I think is really helpful as well. So with the I do example I spoke to before, there's a huge and growing body of evidence that structured pedagogy is one of the most sort of impactful and evidence-based interventions we can do in an LMIC context. And so that's an example of where they're using AI to enhance and reinforce that intervention, as opposed to just sort of dropping in a chatbot on its own. And then the other thing I'd say is that you can't understate the importance of implementation, and just making sure that there's the right support for teachers and students at the point of use, to make sure that they know how to use this stuff and that they're using it correctly. The number of studies I've seen, like there was a sort of prominent randomized control trial that reported a kind of quite significant positive impact of like 0.3 standard deviations. But if you read the fine print, it was only for students who used the product as intended, which was something like 4% of students. And so if we're doing that at scale, then clearly that's not going to have the impact that we want. And so as we look at rolling this stuff out, having both the products be extremely intuitive and easy for the user to figure out, so a sort of iPhone level of intuitive simplicity, as well as the right level of support and the systems to make sure that we're doing that consistently and well at scale, I think is really critical.
Thank you very much. Shall I move on to you, Jaina? So, as we know, OpenAI has made significant strides in natural language processing with models like GPT. So how do you see AI transforming the education sector in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, another $1 million question, and something I spend, all my time thinking about and asking people about and learning from people on. I think the only thing I would say with some degree of certainty for the next sort of 5-10 years is this growing sense that AI is becoming this critical infrastructure for education. It feels like something that isn't in a corner of a school or university, but actually it's as fundamental as providing access to the internet or electricity or notebooks. Like, it feels like something that everyone will use, and it's not just a sort of software purchase. It's really just this core infrastructure that just defines, I think, the future of education. Yeah, that would be my concise answer for that one. I don't know if anyone wanted to add any thoughts.
Maybe I'll then ask you another question, if you don't mind. So, as AI continues to evolve, what do you see as the most important skill and area of knowledge for students to focus on to be prepared for an AI-driven future?
Yeah, it's a good question. I was watching Sam Altman, who's the CEO of OpenAI. He was on a bit of a world tour recently, and he was visiting universities in Berlin and Japan and Seoul. And in one of them, he talked about how success is really dependent on creating a vision and doing things that haven't been done with AI before, which might be quite like a high level statement, but I thought it really talked to how the ability to sort of apply AI to new challenges is more important than memorizing technical details or having very specific technical skills. And I think that over time, skills like leadership, adaptability, problem solving will just become more valuable. We'll value them more as people, and they'll be more complementary to these degrees. I think that AI is going to change the kind of job market. It is going to take over these routine tasks. And I think that maybe there's a world where degree certifications just evolve to emphasize that students can use AI and other technologies to extend their expertise rather than just what they know. So I really see the education sector playing such a crucial role in teaching students how to combine whatever their domain of expertise is with AI fluency, and that will help prepare these graduates for this new kind of world of work. And I think that's particularly relevant to me. I did a history degree and had zero technical skills before working in quite technical roles for the rest of my career. So that's definitely one thing I'd wish I had back as a university student.
Okay, thank you. Can I move to you, Dr. Al-Izza? I have a couple of questions for you as well. So as education increasingly leans on algorithms to personalize learning, you mentioned a Netflixation effect, where content is pushed to students based on their preferences and past behaviors. What are the potential risks of this approach, like reinforcing biases or limiting exposure to diverse ideas? And how can we ensure these algorithms are helping students grow in a balanced, well-rounded way?
I think the key is in the point you mentioned, Najla, which is really the role of the teachers. I think there's a lot of things. I think that the conversation around AI is often driven by tech and driven by tech specialists. And I think what we need to keep in mind is the impact this has on learning, both positive and negative. But when it comes to this issue of things we're saying as well, when it comes to, for instance, using AI that has a very specific way of communicating. It's very deferential. It has a patience of answering your question and then changing again until you're happy with the answer, and it fills really your need, which is not necessarily the way humans interact with each other. So a lot of these things coming, I think, is where the human factor and where the teacher particularly is important, because we're preparing these students as well for the workplace and for interacting with humans in society. And I think that's where it's particularly important. The whole point as well of effortlessness. The more you interact with an AI assistant and the more you kind of expect it to start the conversation, to give you more and more, we have to counter this as well with the need that teachers need to really get students to understand that they need to learn and relearn, and in this whole society and economy of upskilling and reskilling, that will be important, and effort will be important, and it's quite important, I think. And so that for me is where the teachers and the other interactions, it goes beyond teachers, it's also counselors, it's also other types of areas. When we talk a lot about, we don't talk enough about vocational education and training as well, but in that context as well, where they interact in the workplace, that I think is where the reality of human interaction has to come up as well. And we need to bring that conversation as well, I think, when we're talking about AI a lot more, and not only about the possibilities of what AI can do, but we should really look into the uses that we expect as well of it. I think that's perhaps maybe a way of looking into it.
And so what do you think about the fact that with the OECD's focus on promoting equity and exclusiveness, how can policymakers ensure that emerging educational technologies benefit all students, especially those in underserved communities?
So at the OCD, we very much believe in international cooperation in that sense. And so that's where you saw the guidelines I mentioned that were discussed. When we work with countries. That means we work with all types of stakeholders, governments, of course, but they're national, regional. We talk with teachers, we talk with students, we talk with businesses, small and big. And for us, that's where this sort of stakeholder engagement, this type of international cooperation at the regional level as well, that is where those discussions and that peer learning is particularly useful, I think, in this area. And that's where we can we gather best practices when it comes to benefiting students. And I think that's where particularly in underserved communities. And so I think that's where really that peer learning for us is at the core of perhaps allowing that we advance in this in promoting both equity and inclusiveness, as you mentioned.
Thank you. Now we have a number of questions from our audience. I have a question for you, Jared. One of our attendees asks, AI education is becoming essential. What are the best strategies to introduce AI courses in schools from the ground up, ensuring both teachers and students are well equipped?
I guess the answer depends on who you're talking to. So it's different, obviously, for teachers versus policymakers. I mean, the three of us the four of us on this panel, spend a lot of our day thinking about this stuff, and we still find it quite complex and a little bit overwhelming, I think. And so for your kind of typical teacher who's already incredibly stretched with their day jobs and worried about a million other things, I personally think we really just need to be helping teachers make these decisions as opposed to expecting it to sit on their shoulders. And so that means it's kind of incumbent on government and policymakers to really do the work to sift through this technology and the role that it can play, and then help support teachers with the right guidance in terms of what gets implemented. How there's no easy answers to that question, I think. But yeah, expecting teachers to do it on their own, I think is a big ask.
Thank you. Shall I move to you, Jaina? So your question is, in light of the great and successive development in the field of artificial intelligence, how do I deal with these variables in a professional manner?
Yeah, broad question. I mean, I think the simple answer of dealing with all this change as it comes might be just keep engaging with the tools. I think that it's not to say, just use the tools and they're like a panacea for everything, and that just use the technology and we'll figure it out. But it really is that to some extent, you can do a lot of courses to understand AI. I've done that, and I've had others who've done that. You can talk to people about it, you can think about it, but really sometimes the best way to figure out how to use it is just to use it. And we see a lot of teaching sessions and training sessions we do with teachers where we're going through AI tools, not just ChatGPT, but many tools. And they say, oh, can it do this for me? Can it plan my lesson for me? Can it kind of do X or Y? And I think the best way to answer that question is just to try it and experiment with it. And I think as a research company, we're always thinking about how do we help people not get confronted with this blank screen, the first page where you feel kind of intimidated on how you get started. And all of this sort of training and content and best practices we're sharing are focused on unblocking that first step. But really, the best use cases and the most innovative use cases are coming from teachers and educators who are just trying things out. One I think anecdote I'd like to share is that we speak to kind of C-levels at very big companies, and they're kind of like, oh, well, we don't want to use these tools and let people just write, their bedtime stories for their children or create recipes. We want to use them for work productivity and only work productivity. But actually, the best way to develop this fluency in AI is to play with it and experiment with it and find a way for it to be useful in your life so that you can then start thinking about how to apply it at work. There is no kind of one specific way to do it. And, the term prompt engineering, it gets too much airtime. It's really not a science, and it's evolving so quick. So I'd say, yeah, use the tools, use all of them, think about what they can do and what they can't. They're not perfect, they make mistakes. And it's sort of all of our jobs to think about the best ways to implement them.
Thank you. Moving on to you, Dr. Elisa. So micro-credentials are applied to recognition of prior learning. Can we use assessments alone to provide micro-credentials without any training for students who have already learned skills outside of school?
So the whole issue of learning outside of school, or if you will, learning, the whole informal learning, non-formal learning, is of course extremely important. And it's not just micro-credentials, it's really valuing that learning experience, which we've seen now the workplace starting to move in that direction. So if you think particularly at the whole wave around skills first hiring, where some employers are starting now to recognize that people may be skilled actually without necessarily having an academic recognition. And that is something that we welcome actually, because a lot of, as I mentioned, a lot of people, you can learn a lot of the skills that are most in demand nowadays when you're thinking about socio-emotional skills, other types of what is called soft skills. Quite a lot of those can be learned outside of and without having necessarily an academic qualification. And so that is something that can be assessed. It is assessed already. We do at the OECD assess it already with both young people and elder ones. And so there are assessment tools for this skill. So it is very much possible to assess around those skills and value them as well without having, it just increases as well the pool of talent if you move away from only the academic recognition.
Thank you. I have another question from our audience for you, Jaina. Is there a fundamental approach that we can focus on when using ChatGPT for educational purposes?
A fundamental approach. So I think the first approach would be privacy and security first. So I think there was some questions that came up around training on student data and sensitive data. I would never encourage putting any sensitive data in the free version of ChatGPT, or if you are using the free version of ChatGPT, going in and kind of unticking data sharing. As a rule, OpenAI takes data privacy very seriously. We do have an education version of ChatGPT called ChatGPT Edu, which is the secure version that is built for universities like KFUPM or the country of Estonia I mentioned, who are giving this to students and teachers. And that version is more customized for educational use. It's integrated with other systems that schools use. I don't want to give you the sales pitch on that though, so I'd say go and look that up on the internet if you're interested in learning more about that. But I will say more the general spirit of what we're doing as an education team is encouraging security, academic rigor, so really working very closely with teachers so that students are not misusing these tools or using ChatGPT to cheat, and equity and inclusivity. So if we're working with any school, we really only work with schools that want to do this for the whole campus and not give kind of premium AI access to half the school and not half others. That's already happening enough in the world. And I think that in particular outside the US and the regions I work with, having that equity access to intelligence is really crucial.
You want to add something, Jared?
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment and also
Yeah.
a related question for Jaina. I really liked what you were saying before about how it can be really effective to see this sort of bottom-up groundswell of teachers just experimenting with it. And so the way we see this permeating through education systems, I guess, will be a mix of bottom up and top down, where you have sort of people playing around and figuring out their own use cases together with policymakers at the top, sort of determining what they would like to see and pushing that down. In my whole presentation was about edtech products that take a foundational model such as ChatGPT and then put it into a wrapper with some combination of prompt engineering and an interface, and would be interested to hear your thoughts on how you see the role of those product wrappers as distinct from the foundational model and the roles they can each play.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that we're still figuring that out, honestly. I think that there's such amazing ed techs out there, like you called out so many incredible ones. There's ones that are building on the models every day, and there's a whole kind of wave of new ed techs and founders that have found incredible use for AI, really just to enhance what was already working. So I think that the most successful areas I'm seeing that happen are in really specialized specific applications or in specialized areas. So it could be supporting a specific academic discipline. It could be supporting one area that's really lacking today in engagement or supporting teachers. I think that the landscape still feels very broad to me and almost somewhat fragmented. And I wouldn't say, especially looking outside the US, there's been this salve, like this sort of Conmigo level brand that has won the whole market. I actually think that there's so much room for loads of different AI techs and tutors and tools that fit very comfortably in an existing ecosystem with ChatGPT and other infrastructure like Google and Microsoft and AWS. But it's a really good question, and one we're continuing to think about. I think that there's definitely room for all of this, and I think that the encouraging of the building in specialized ways makes a huge amount of sense. But I haven't really seen one that sort of won the whole market yet. So I'm intrigued as to how that goes.
And context matters so much, right? And that's the trouble that the international scalers have. We've long had this question as to what extent would we see that those edtech products from the higher income countries like the US and Europe that have vastly greater R&D budgets be the ones that end up kind of dominating globally. But at least in sub-Saharan Africa, it seems to very much be either the local innovators or the innovators that are building for a specific country context that are having the most success.
Amazing, really interesting.
So I think I will move on to another question. It's questions for myself. So the question is, AI governance in education emphasizes ethics and fairness, but overcaution may delay progress. When can we expect real AI-driven implementations in our universities and secondary education? And how can we accelerate adoption responsibly? Oh, this is a very good question. AI-driven implementations in universities and secondary education are already emerging. As Jaina said, they worked with KFU PM, but they are not yet widespread. And this is due to some governance concerns and ethical consideration and some infrastructure challenges. So I think that the pace of adoption will accelerate over the next 3 to 5 years, and this will be driven by advancements in AI reliability, as well as development of policy and the readiness of educators. So you may ask, when can we expect these real AI-driven implementations? So in the near term, in around 1 to 2 years, we will see AI-driven tutoring, personalized learning systems as the one that I spoke about, automated assessment tools and AI-assisted grading is already in place in a number of universities, such as the Saudi Electronic University. And there's some adoption in some other research heavy universities and some schools as well. Now, my guess is that in and this is again just a guess, that in around 3 to 5 years, we will have AI integration in the curriculum, and personalized student learning pathways will be underway. Maybe some AI-powered decision-making for resource allocation. We will have better interactive and AI-assisted classrooms with virtual tutors. And I think that after 2030, AI can become something like a co-teacher, augmenting human educators in a more interactive and adaptive learning environment. And at the time, governance frameworks, which we are already working on, the Ministry of Education is working on, the National E-Learning Center has published some policies, I think, a couple of weeks ago. They will all be in place, and they will ensure fairness, transparency in education. I think we are near to the finish of our session, so I'd like to give each one of our panelists 2 minutes, if you don't mind, to reflect on this session, please. Shall I start with you, Jared?
Sure. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for sticking it out. It's been a really interesting discussion, and I really enjoyed hearing from the other panelists. One takeaway for me is actually a response to the last question in the chat, is about whether this will potentially replace the teacher, and I just want to reiterate what I think others have already said, that I think we all need to be really clear that this is never about replacing teachers. It's about upgrading people and processes throughout the education system, and augmenting what people do to make them better, including teachers. So this is definitely not about replacing teachers, and the role of an education is about so much more than just conveying packets of information to our students. It's about developing them as well-rounded human beings, and the role of the teacher is always going to be absolutely critical for that as well. And then I'll just bang the drum one more time about my earlier point about how important it is that we're being sort of driven by evidence in the decisions we make about what to do and what to adopt, especially at a policy level, because there's been many broken promises, or edtech that's failed to live up to the hype in the past, and we need to be careful not to repeat those mistakes again.
Thank you, Jared. Dr. Liz.
Thank you. Also, thanks from my side to the NELC, which really is a great team. We work with them, and I have to just recognize the quality of the people working there. But just on Jared's point and others, for me, it's also important that perhaps precisely if we're going to put teachers at the center, that we continue this conversation as purpose-driven AI, and move from this sort of reactiveness that there is this tendency in education and training systems historically to react to developments rather than drive them. And I think it's important, particularly given all of the implication that this has on the learner, on a teacher's well-being, and as you mentioned as well, their own taking this to the core and using it, but also later on the workplace, the people, the students, and that we are preparing as future citizens. So I think it's very important that this is strategic governance, strategic deployment, strategic conversation with the stakeholders, and I think that's where and through also cooperation, we're very happy to support this. Thanks.
And Jaina?
Yeah, I want to echo everything that the previous panelists said. Also, thank you to NELC for just putting on a really fantastic session, getting really deeply into the topics of the big questions, like what motivates a student to learn, and how do you deliver the very best learning experience for every single student. I really enjoyed this discussion. I think that it seemed like we were walking this line between getting started and adopting these tools, experimenting with them, versus, striking the right balance with caution, thinking very deeply about trust, safety, ethics, all of the implications of rushing too quickly into these tools, which is definitely the right balance to be thinking about. As this technology advances very quickly, we're going to see a huge amount of change over the year. I work at OpenAI, I can barely keep up with it, so there is change coming. But fundamentally, it is about putting the teacher in the driver's seat, the school in the driver's seat, and having these kind of conversations to figure out these answers together.
Thank you very much. What I would like to add is that here in Saudi Arabia, AI in education is being adopted. We have, as you know, a track for computer science and engineering for high school students. There will be a course which will be introduced next year or the year after. This is for students on the general education track, again, high school students, about an introduction to AI. There are numerous training courses from Sadaya as well as from Academia Twig and so on, which are all free to help people, to help educate them, to help raise awareness. And again, I think that AI should be viewed as a tool and not as a replacement. I would like to reiterate what Jared said. AI will never replace humans. At the end of the day, it is just a tool that will answer you based on the data that it has been trained on. And so it can never show empathy. It can never act like a human being. So please just keep that point in mind, because I know that many of us are afraid of AI. We're afraid of it taking over our jobs, but that is not the case. It's just a tool to help us. And we, the humans, are the ones who developed it. With that, I will give the mic to Zaid to conclude. And I thank you all for attending, and I thank my fellow panelists, and I thank the National E-Learning Center for this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Today's sessions stand as a testament to the power of shared knowledge and engagement, and we are profoundly thankful for your presence. We trust that the insights discussed provided value to each of you. Our gratitude extends to Dr. Najla Tuwaji, whose moderation skills navigated us through this webinar discussion, and to our esteemed panelists, whose expertise significantly enriched our dialogue. Equally, the active participation of every attendee has been integral to the success of this discussion. As we close, we turn our focus to continual improvement and growth. A survey link has been made available in the chat section, and we invite you to share your feedback and suggestions. This input is crucial as we strive to elevate our content and ensure future sessions are even more impactful. In conclusion, your time and attention have been greatly appreciated. We eagerly anticipate your participation in future discussions, where we will continue to explore exciting and relevant topics. For now, from all of us at the National E-Learning Center, I'm Zaid Rgeb. Goodbye.